us for this afternoon's webinar. And we'll just wait 1 or 2 minutes for those who are in the waiting room to also get into the main room. Just 2 minutes for them to get in. Yep. Okay, so we start. Again, I say good afternoon to everyone who is on this webinar. My name is Shade Odunaya. I am an ex-official board member of the CFA Society Nigeria and the chairperson of the Advocacy Committee. I trust that we're all keeping safe and healthy, because we all need to support our frontliners and government to get this plague under control, even before a vaccine that is acceptable is made. First of all, let's just quickly sort out admin issues. Please ensure you are muted at all times so that the noise in your background will not affect everyone else on the webinar. We don't want noise in the background. Also, I'd like to encourage you to type in your comments in the chat box or your reactions, as the case may be, and respond as directed by the facilitator. So we're going to get to a stage where we'll take some polls. So we'd like you to please respond and participate. We have a total of about 450 people that registered for this webinar. And right now we have 108 people in the room. So I'm sure more people will be joining us pretty soon. So I would like to say thank you for all those who came on time. We appreciate that you are interested in increasing your ethical awareness and promoting ethical conduct in our market. Just for the benefits of Sonia, our guest speaker, our audience today is very diverse. We have candidates that are attending this webinar. We have university students, we have lecturers, we have society members, we have regulators, and then we have industry practitioners who are not necessarily CFA society members. So it's a very diverse audience we have. We know also that technology can be an issue, so please be patient. If you are going to speak, speak clearly and very succinctly. Short sentences will be best. And then be patient for the other person to finish before you speak. And if you happen to get disconnected due to network quality, I'd like to encourage you to please continue to try to reconnect, and because it's going to be a very engaging session. So I'll go ahead now to just give some opening remarks before I turn should I call it microphone? Since we're virtual now, it's not microphone. I just keep quiet and then let Sonia take over and lead us through what she has for us today. For those of you who do not know, the CFA Society Nigeria is a member society of the CFA Institute. The CFA Institute is the institute that awards the gold standard global certification that most of you know as the CFA Charter. As a member society of the Institute, our mission is to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence for the ultimate benefit of society. So today's meeting, today's webinar is focusing on the promoting of the highest standard of ethics and education, because we see ethics and being educated about ethics and knowing what to do about ethics as central to the integrity of the market. So today's webinar is one in a series of advocacy actions by our society to raise awareness and knowledge of ethics in our market. You may wonder why, especially now. And I'll tell you, there was a global member survey that was conducted by the CFA Institute right at the beginning of the global lockdown in April 2020. The survey was aimed at getting the opinion of members on how the economic crisis induced by the coronavirus is impacting capital markets, investment management, and the authorities' response. One of the questions asked in the survey was whether morals were stronger than greed in times of crisis. So the question was focused on what do members think about that? Will we see a lot more greedy actions because the market is in crisis? And the result of the survey showed that 45% of the respondents globally felt that it is likely. In Africa, the risk is even higher because most of the respondents in Africa, 55% of respondents from Africa actually believe that it is likely. So it's just the right time to discuss ethics. So this session today is one of the efforts of our society to bring this discussion to the fore in our markets and within our membership and practitioners. To take today's session is none other than the director at the CFA Institute EMEA office that is focused on ethics education and professional standards. Her role is principally to lead the Institute's effort to develop, promote, and deliver educational content for CFA Institute members and investment professionals in that area of focus, which is ethics and professional standards. Her name is Sonia Gandhi. Sonia is not new to us in CFA Society Nigeria. She has been to Nigeria before. She has taken a workshop in Lagos and Abuja on behalf of the society previously. So she's somewhat familiar with our environment and our people. Let me just give you a little bit of background about Sonia's experience before she joined the CFA Institute. Sonia is an investment professional herself. She has over 20 years in the investment industry, working with several global blue chip investment banks. She was at one time Director, Institutional Equities at the Deutsche Bank in the Asia Pacific region, focused on the client base in that region. She has also worked with JP Morgan, BNP Paribas, and Jardine Fleming in various roles. Her responsibility covers equity sales, capital market transactions, and global account management. She has also served in various capacities as a volunteer with CFA Society India, and most recently as a director on the board. Sonia is a CFA charter holder, I'm sure you must have guessed. She's extremely passionate about ethics education and has therefore conducted, since joining the Institute, workshops for investment banks, asset managers, professional bodies, regulators, as well as finance students at numerous management institutes and universities across the globe. And of course, I will add, including Nigeria. We are very excited to have Sonia with us today because we know that it's going to be an engaging session. When she was here previously, the feedback that we got was that everybody felt, they felt really engaged and they felt they learned a lot and they were able to understand the principles that she was trying to pass across, especially using the case study methodology. I'll therefore like to encourage every one of us to be very attentive, participate actively. You may need to get a pen and paper to take down some notes. And more importantly, I would be expecting that at the end of it all, we will be individually, taking some action steps that will ensure that what we are learning becomes entrenched in our day-to-day behaviors and decisions. So once again, I'd like to remind us that we should mute ourselves. And should you get disconnected, do not give up, just keep reconnecting. A quick run through of what the agenda would look like before Sonia starts speaking. Sonia is going to be speaking for like an hour, 30 minutes. And then after that, we will take some Q&A session of about 25 minutes. And then we have a few announcements for you, and then we will round up. The plan really is that we should be done by about 4 p.m. So stay engaged, listen out for what the points at which she's going to be making and when she's going to require you to take action. We want it to be quite engaging and we want it to be quite impactful. So Sonia, I welcome you once again to Nigeria, albeit virtually. You have the floor. You're welcome. Very, very much welcome.
Thank you, Shade, for a really warm welcome. And I really liked some of the stuff that you said. And most importantly, to be able to, I think you really very beautifully talked about the essence of today's training, to be able to implement it in our day-to-day lives. It's supposed to be, I'll be using some short cases faced by professionals in the finance industry, in the investment industry. And all these are real life cases we've seen. Either I have faced some of those in my career, or my colleagues have seen others face that, and we've written short cases around it. So I think for anyone who works in the finance industry, those cases are going to resonate. So when I put up those cases, and I'll just give you instructions on how to vote, I would request everyone to cast their vote, and we'll see how we as a group think about those situations. The point in today's cases is it's not the choice that you make, but it's how you are thinking, how you defend that choice. What is your thinking process behind making that choice? And we'll see that we learn a lot from each other. One of the ways that is, I would encourage everyone to use the chat function. So when I put up a case and you make a choice, please write your comments why you chose that. And Shade will be monitoring that chat very closely. Also, you have the option of raising your hand virtually. So technology does allow us to, replicate a lot of what we do in real life. Me standing in front of a group of professionals and doing this session. Today's session is meant to be participative and engaging. So I request everyone to go to www.sli.do on your smartphones, on your tablets, and you will you will see a hashtag over there, and the code for today's session is trust. So I request everyone to log in, and when the time to vote comes, I will let you know. The fun of today's session will be only if you are able to participate. So please do log in, do cast your vote, do use the chat function to actively engage. I'll give you a few more seconds so that everyone can log into this. I want to start today's session by talking about the findings of the Industry Trust Survey. This survey is done jointly by CFA Institute along with Greenwich Associates. We all agree that when someone entrusts their hard-earned money to someone else to manage, it's a very big decision that they make. So the objective of surveys like these is to find out how are investors doing? What are their expectations from professionals like many of you on this call today who are either managing their money, who are advising them? And what we as professionals can do to better meet those expectations. As you can see from the findings of this survey, trust is not given uniformly across the globe. Before the world shut down, I spent 2 weeks in Australia. You can see Australia has the lowest trust rankings of any country in the world. And for very good reason. Some of you may be aware that there was a Royal Commission report on the misconduct in finance industry. This survey was in the aftermath of the findings of a whole lot of misconduct going on in the industry. Country where I sit, UK, trust levels are again very low, 33%. We included South Africa this year, right? We have 12 countries now, and gradually the idea is to include more countries. In fact, I have recommended that Nigeria, after my trip last time, I recommended to my colleagues that Nigeria should be a part of this survey as well. So you might see that happen. So you can see trust is not given uniformly everywhere. Let's also look at the findings of this survey from relative rankings of different industries. We all know that when the last financial crisis occurred, which was more than a decade ago, the trust in our industry hit rock bottom. Over the last 11 years, it has gradually been inching up. But as we can see from the findings of the survey, we still have a very, very long way to go. We continue to lag behind many other industries. Let me show you some covers. I always believe that pictures, speak very far more impactfully than words do. Let me show you the cover of the Fortune magazine after the last financial crisis. These are the CEOs of the 4 largest global investment banks. And the question being asked is, what were they smoking? We definitely don't want to be smoking whatever they were smoking. As we all know, the previous crisis before this one was at the turn of the century, the dot-com bubble. This was the cover of the Fortune magazine then, when that bubble burst. Can we ever trust Wall Street again? And these 2 covers juxtaposed with the findings, the first 2 slides, the findings of the industry trust survey, tell us a very powerful story. Investors do not trust our industry enough. And it's a cause of concern. Why is it so important? Why are we talking so much about trust? It is important because trust is at the core of everything in our industry. The concept of stewardship, the careful and responsible management of money entrusted to our care. Our industry is all about the concept of stewardship, values, and responsibilities. After all, the foundation of financial markets is public trust and public confidence. So now we know that the public does not trust us enough to do the right thing. We have established that it's a problem because it goes against what is at the very heart of our industry. So obviously things can't be allowed to go on like this forever. There is a problem. It is a critical problem. It needs to be addressed. So what do we do about it? Many a times in life, I find it helps to go back to the very basics and ask ourselves very simple questions. And I put it down in the form of 3 simple questions we can ask ourselves while facing any dilemma in our professional lives. A, does this violate the law? Is it illegal? Because if the response to that is yes, it violates the law, that's pretty much a hard stop. We don't proceed beyond that. The problem in our industry is, and I worked in this industry for a couple of decades, and it's full of very smart people, very, very ambitious, very smart people. And we also know that we should not cross the legal boundaries. So very often we just stop short of crossing the legal boundaries, right? But we rarely stop to ask ourselves question number 2, that is it ethical? And question number 3, is it fair? How does it look from the eyes of the person who's getting impacted by my actions, i.e. my client? Do you know which is the first recorded bubble in the history of financial markets? The tulip speculation in 17th century Holland. For some reason, Dutch people were enamored by these beautiful flowers called tulips. They were buying tulips, they were buying tulip fields, they were sowing tulips. It was a national mania. People were just going crazy. And when things started getting out of hand, some enterprising people started selling something akin to what we will call futures in today's scenario. They started promising these greedy and trustworthy investors that at a future date, they will deliver them tulips or tulip fields, knowing fully well that when the time came, they will have no flowers to deliver. And many of us are aware what happened when that bubble burst. The Dutch economy suffered for a very, very long time. If I look at the behavior of the participants in this bubble, not telling lies, promising something, knowing fully well that you won't be able to deliver on your promise, make good on your promise, is bad, but it's not illegal in most cases. However, their behavior definitely crossed the boundaries of ethics, and it crossed the boundaries of fairness. And when I look at the history of financial market bubbles, from the first recorded bubble to the last one, the credit crisis, we saw that slide on what were they smoking. The pattern remains, facts change, but the pattern remains the same. The behavior of the participants, their actions rarely cross the legal boundaries. And that's why we see there is crisis after crisis in our industry, but very few people end up going behind bars because legal boundaries in many cases are not crossed. But the boundaries of ethics and honesty and fairness are crossed with extreme nonchalance. So today's session is focusing on question number 2 and question number 3. This is one of the best definitions of ethical behavior that I have come across. Ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching. And I really like the latter half of this definition. Even when doing the wrong thing is legal. It syncs beautifully with the last slide that we saw about those 3 questions. Even when the response to question number 1 is no, it does not cross the legal boundaries, it is legal, should we still be doing it? Or should we be asking ourselves some additional questions? This is the first polling question for today, but I'm aware some people may have logged in later. So I'm going to go back to the very first slide and give everyone an opportunity to take out their smartphones, tablets, go to www.sli.do. You will see a hash, you don't have to put in any details, just a hashtag, put the word trust, T-R-U-S-T next to it, and you are ready to go. This is the first polling question for today. Which do you think has more influence on whether a person will engage in unethical conduct? Do we think it's our disposition, our moral character, or do we think outside circumstances have a bigger role to play in whether we indulge in unethical conduct? I'm going to open the poll and let's see how we think about this today. Okay, I have opened the poll. Situational versus dispositional attribution of behavior. Do we think it's our moral character, or do we think outside circumstances have more to do with whether we engage in unethical conduct? Good to see many polls, many responses coming in. We already have around 30, 40 responses so far. Keep it coming, and we'll give it a few more seconds so that everyone is able to cast their vote. Okay, let's look at the result. Quite a nice split. 55% of people feel it's our moral character, and 45% feel it's outside circumstances. Okay, I'm going to park these findings here, and I'm going to talk to you about an experiment that took place in the early 70s. Many of you may have heard the name of Professor Philip Zimbardo. He is a well-known psychologist, and he was a professor at Stanford University. And he was grappling with exactly the same question on which we are so divided as a group today: dispositional versus situational attribution of behavior. So he was a professor. He had access to a bunch of college students. he decided to do an experiment. He took a bunch of students and he divided them into two categories, prisoners and guards. And then a makeshift prison, a faux prison, was created in the basement of Stanford University. The idea was that it must resemble real life as far as possible. So there were dingy, narrow, smelly corridors like in a real prison. The cells of the prisoners were tiny, with paint peeling off, with very low ceilings. Even the uniforms that they were issued keeping in mind that it must replicate real life. So the guards, they got smart, well-fitting starched uniforms. The prisoners, they got loose, ill-fitting, hanging robes, the kind of uniform you wear on a sunny day and you will end up feeling depressed. Now they are given these uniforms and they are all put in that makeshift prison, and Professor Zimbardo and other professors are observing everyone's behavior. Much to their surprise, most participants adapted to their assigned roles, far exceeding Professor Zimbardo's expectations. The guards, in their smart, starched, well-fitted uniforms with that newfound sense of power and authority, they started abusing, bullying, harassing, torturing the inmates. Who were these inmates? Many of them were their college buddies, their friends, their colleagues, their classmates. The prisoners, the inmates, in those faded robes, in the depressing environment of the prison, being confronted by these guards, many of the prisoners, the inmates, started accepting that behavior in a very docile manner. Some of them even had a mental breakdown because of all the bullying and harassment. An experiment which was meant to last for 2 weeks had to be abandoned in 6 days because behaviors were going all over the place. The findings of this experiment tell us that situational influences have more to do with a person's ethical behavior than a person's character. Under the right conditions, or for that matter, wrong conditions, like the Stanford prison experiment, good people like all of us can be induced, seduced, and initiated to act unethically. And I know I'm making a very provocative statement by involving all of us, you, me, everyone on this call. And I'm not saying that, we'll go out and, we'll start abusing and bullying our colleagues. No, but in a high pressure industry that we work in, or for the students who are on the webinar today, many of them aspire to work in this industry. There are multiple pressures on us at all times. Pressure to keep the boss happy, pressure to keep the clients happy, pressure to think about our next promotion, pressure to think about our quarterly targets. All these pressures can combine and overwhelm us and lead us to act in a manner which may not be in sync with how we like to think of ourselves as ethical individuals. And we'll talk about some of those situational influences pressures today. And the idea of this session is not to provide you any answers, but the idea is to make you mindful, make you aware of those situational influences, and to provide you some strategies to deal with them, so that next time you are confronted with them, A, you will recognize them, and B, you will hopefully be better equipped to deal with them. Let's look at our first case study. You are a fixed income portfolio manager who works as part of a team that invests the assets of large institutional clients. The members of your team tell you in confidence that they plan to resign from the firm to start their own investment management firm. They invite you to join them, but you decline. You know that their actions will at least temporarily affect the performance of your clients' portfolios. So these are the facts of the case. You work as part of a team, you manage assets of large institutional clients. Some members, not one or two, a bunch of members of your team come and confide in you that they are leaving and they make you a job offer. You respectfully decline. You are also aware that that this thing will impact your client's portfolios negatively in the short term. However, you decide to do nothing about it at all. I want you to put yourself in that situation and think about it. Your actions are okay because you're respecting the confidentiality of your colleagues. Probably okay because personal turnover is a commonplace occurrence that is to be expected, more so in our industry. Probably not okay because client performances will be affected when they leave. Or you feel it's not okay for some other reason, right? Think about it a bit. In all the cases today, what will really help us is if we put ourselves in that situation. And like I said, these are real life cases. These have happened to people. So you are there, your colleagues come and confide in you, you refuse the job offer, you are aware what's going to happen. And what would you do in this situation? How would you react? So I'm going to open polling and let's see how we think about this. Sorry, oh yeah. Feel free to write in the chat, defend your stance, what you chose, and we'll look at that as well. We'll give it a few more seconds so that everyone who wants to vote has the opportunity to do so. Okay, let's look at the voting is still open. In the meantime, I'll open the results. Okay, so almost half this group feels it's not okay because client performances will be affected. Another 1/3 feels not okay for some other reason. There are some people, around 10% each, who feel it's okay because we are respecting the confidentiality of your colleagues. And I take that point because the fact is that many of us spend a lot of time at workplace, right? And some of our colleagues actually become good friends. And when somebody comes and confides in us, how do we break that trust? How do we break that confidence? So I get that totally. Some people feel that personal turnover is a commonplace occurrence that is to be expected. And more so in the finance industry, it is a commonplace occurrence. So the question arises, is it really my problem? Should I be concerning myself with this issue? Is it my responsibility? So Shadi, do we see any comments about people, why they've chosen, are they saying anything about it?
Yes, we have some comments in the chat box. Somebody says, since the interest of clients should be above the firms and the employees, it is not okay. Mm-hmm. That's from Lawal. Caller says, I think he has the moral obligation to let the supervisor know. Of course, the supervisor won't stop them, but it would help the supervisor to plan and ensure their exit won't affect clients' performance. Mm-hmm. Those are the two comments related to the question, although some people were voting in the chat box as well.
Okay. No, these are both very robust arguments. So the fact is that we can say whether it's my responsibility or no, or how do I break their confidence? And in these situations, and towards the end of this session, I'll talk about our ethical decision-making framework developed by CFA Institute. I find, and I have started implementing that in real life, and it really helps me. When confused, I sometimes take a step back and think about who I owe a duty to in this scenario. Primarily, who do I owe a duty to? And when I take that one moment to do this quick check in my mind, I realize that even though my colleagues have confided in me, the issue is that I owe a responsibility to my clients. Right? And if I know their performances are going to be getting impacted, I cannot be a passive bystander. I need to do this. We saw the first 4 slides of this presentation. It was all about how investors are not trusting us enough, right? And one of the ways to correct that is truly put client interests first under all circumstances. Having established this, what are some of the ways we can do this? Today's session is also about discussing alternative courses of actions. And sometimes I've realized that many a times people are not even aware of the consequences of their actions. Maybe you don't have to just go and complain about them. Sometimes having a constructive dialogue with your colleagues also helps. Trying to see them, trying to make them understand the consequences of their actions, right? Of course, if even that doesn't work, then you need to figure out what you need to be doing something about it. The point about putting up this simple case was being a passive bystander. It's not really an option. You need to be clear about who you owe a duty to, and then there are ways to go about it, right? It's not that there is only one way that you have to complain about them. You can have a conversation with them or see what else best you can do. The key point I'm trying to make with this case is we often make unethical decisions not because we are bad people. We've already established the situational versus dispositional attribution of behavior. We are all very good people with great intent of doing the right thing. But sometimes psychological biases, social and organizational factors, and situational influences can affect our decision making. These biases and influences lead to weaknesses in how we process information and make decisions, which can lead to unethical behavior. And now we look at some of these influences. But before that, I'm going to ask you one more question. It's a fun question. Which, according to you, is more practical? Being ethical 98% of the time or being ethical 100% of the time? And 98% is not cast in stone. The question I'm really asking this group is, which, according to you, is more practical, being ethical most of the time or being ethical all of the time? Just think, give it a thought and vote, and please put in your comments, because I would like to know why you chose what you chose. I would love to know why how you're thinking about it. So, yes, here we go. Which, according to you, is more practical? Being ethical most of the time versus being ethical all of the time. Put in your comments in the chat why you chose 98%, why you chose 100%. Okay, let's see. Nice. Again, I love it when there is an equal split, because I think that's it's fun to see how, you know, people are thinking about this. So almost 52% people feel 98% of the time, and the remaining feel being ethical 100% of the time. So are we seeing any comments in the chat box?
Yes, and some people are still voting. I have comments such as, because it's coming in so quickly, it's scrolling too fast for me. There should be no compromise as investment professionals. So that's the person picking. But the person said A, which is 98% of the time, but then says that because there should be no compromise as investment professional. Another person, Muiwa, says A, because of the effects of situational influence.
Okay.
Aaron Moselle says, oh, come on now. It's getting, because the things are coming in. Okay. So fast, it's unbelievable.
It's testing Sade's reading skills.
Yeah, it's actually challenging me to scroll down.
I then over so that I just get a flavor for how people.
Yeah, I'll just maybe Gloria can also help.
Yes, okay. Gloria.
Someone says if we have two people, all of the time it is a small world and trust broken is difficult to end. That person picked 100% of the time. Somebody says most of the time, nobody's perfect.
Okay.
Another person says the moment your ethical capacity is in doubt, you are dead underwater.
Okay.
it's impossible to be ethical all the time. Being ethical 100% of the time has always worked for me. Giving room for a little sleep may open room for being biased, unprofessional, and above all unethical.
Okay.
Someone else says consistency breeds habit. Person
Mhm.
picked the 100%.
Oh,
Most
that's
of the
very,
time,
yeah.
most
Okay,
of the
thank you, Shadi.
time, okay.
Yeah. So I like that consistency is good because, when you decide that you will always do the right thing, you don't think about it. You just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Whereas, Shade, you read some of the comments which said nobody is perfect. There are
Mhm.
situational influences, and that's a justification for 98% of the time. In one of the sessions, somebody told me it's like keeping a buffer, like cheating at Christmas time, right? So I
Yeah.
just wanted us to think about it, and I also wanted to introduce an important concept. But let's do a case first. You are responsible for submitting the travel and entertainment expense reports for your boss, Pablo Dunn. Recently, you've encountered problems collecting receipts from Dunn to support some of his expenses. Because the missing receipts are for small amounts, you have learned how to manage the accounting system and submit his expense report without the receipts. Recently, Dunn returned from a business trip with large expenses that he does not have receipts for. When you inquire about the receipts, Dunn responds, I paid cash for these expenses and I don't know where I put the receipts. Please manage like you have done in the past. So your boss, he is not necessarily a bad person. From the case, it seems to me, he's a careless person. So in the past, you were okay. They were small expenses. You put it in the system. However, this time he's come back with a large expense, not supported by the receipts, and it's making you uncomfortable. So you do absolutely the right thing. You have a dialogue with him. And he says, I paid cash. I don't know where I put the receipts. Kindly manage like you've done in the past. So you submit his report without the missing receipts. Your actions are okay because you're following boss's instructions. Probably okay because he's often lost receipts before. Probably not okay because you may be overriding the accounting system, or you feel it's not okay for any other reason, which you can, feel free to express on the chat. So I'll open the polls here. Okay, because you are following boss's instructions. Okay, because he's often lost receipts in the past doesn't make him a bad person. Not okay because you may be overriding the accounting system, or you feel it's not okay under any circumstance.
Some people are voting in the chat box. You're supposed to vote on the website, otherwise it will not form part of the summary.
I know, yes. Thank you, Shade, for pointing that out.
I
Okay.
have one raised hand, or maybe you
Okay.
want to take the result first.
Okay. Yeah, and then we can hear from them. Okay, let's look at the results. An overwhelming majority feels not okay under any circumstance. 30% probably not okay. Nobody thinks it's okay. That's interesting. Let's hear what the person has to say.
Okay, Gloria, can you unmute the person that raised his hand? There's one person with a raised hand. Although it seems to have dropped the hand now.
Okay.
Gloria,
Okay.
can you find him?
Anything you see in the comment?
No. He has dropped his hand, so don't worry.
Okay, that's fine.
What we have in the comment box is not okay because the boss has been negligent. Rules are rules. A lot of people are saying not okay, not okay. Then someone asked a question: what if he's the owner of the company?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we'll come to that.
So not okay because it opens room for fraud for the person. Situational. So most of the people that typed in the chat box were just saying not okay, rules are rules, except
And
for
we
that
saw
one question.
even the voting results show that 100% of this group feels not okay. Nobody has voted for it might be okay. So the point, so the point why I put up this cases, and we all agree it's not okay. The point I really want to bring about is when was the time to have that conversation? Now, when he came back with a large expense, or the first time that he approached you to do something wrong, right? By initially succumbing to his request of processing his expenses without the receipts, we kind of established a benchmark for our behavior, which kind of made him comfortable. He felt, okay, Sonia submitted this time, and I can ask her to do other stuff for me. And so what I'm trying to introduce with this is the concept of very, very important concept of slippery slope. The first dishonest act is the most important one to prevent. The first time he asked you to submit those expenses, even though they were for small amounts, was the time for you to take a stance and speak to him about it. It's easier to be ethical 100% of the time than 98%, because that 2% leeway you give yourself becomes 3, 5, 10. Quarter end is coming. I haven't met my revenue targets. Let me recommend this product to my client, which I am aware is not in her best interest, but it's a high commission product. So it will help me fulfill my quarter end requirements. Next quarter comes, I'm a very ethical person. I will not repeat this behavior. Trust me. Next quarter comes, you will find it so much easier to replicate that behavior, not only for that one client, but for many other clients as well. The classic slippery slope. We all know Bernie Madoff serving a 140-year prison term for perpetuating the largest Ponzi scheme the world has ever seen. And this is not to condone what he said, but he said something very similar. He said it began with adjusting returns for weak performance in one quarter, with plans to correct the manipulation in the following quarter. However, performance did not improve, escalating the manipulation, the classic slippery slope, right? And again, going back to the previous going back to that point about 98%, 100%, that little leeway we give ourselves can become bigger and bigger. And the previous case, the right time to stop your boss from that was when the first time he came to you. Let's look at some of the other situational influences. Obedience to authority. We are far more likely to indulge in unethical actions when instructed by our boss than on our own. And bosses are very smart. They would rarely ever ask you to do something unethical in a very straightforward manner. It would be couched in terms of assets under management or your performance metrics, which will make it a little bit more difficult for you to understand that something is going on. How do we justify our actions? I was doing what the boss told me to do. What was I to do? I was simply following orders. Conformity with others. We often take our cues about the proper way to act from our colleagues, from our peers in the industry. How do we justify what we are doing? Everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay. At work, we want to be part of the team, we want to be part of the group, and if everybody else wants to do something which we might feel is not right, sometimes we struggle to take a stance because we don't want to be seen as someone as the spoil sport. How do we justify ourselves? We are a pretty smart group. If the group feels like that, it must be okay. We already talked about incrementalism, and we'll talk about it a little bit more towards the end of the session. Overconfidence in our ability to act appropriately. We all have an inflated sense of our own ethicality. We all feel we are more ethical, we are more sorted, we are more sensible than our friends, our colleagues, our peers, our bosses. And that leads us to take actions without indulging in adequate deliberation. How do we justify ourselves? I'm pretty smart. I won't fall for those issues. I know I can see better. I know better. So I mentioned to you that before the world shut down, I was in Sydney and I was presenting to a bank, and the whole leadership team of the bank was sitting there, the senior leadership team. And one of them said something which really resonated with me, and I want to share it with you. When I discussed this slide, he said, Sonia, at the beginning of my career, at the start of my career, It was the first two influences which were more important, which were affecting my behavior. Because I was so new, I would listen more to my bosses. I would not want to make anybody in the team unhappy. So I would blindly do what others were doing. And he said, now that I sit on the leadership team, I have to be more aware. I have to be more mindful of the last two influences. A, incrementalism, because I know I can get away with a lot of things without anyone questioning me. And, I can rationalize it, but that can lead to something bigger. So I have to be very aware of that. And B, because I'm so successful now, that overconfidence may set in. And when I look back at my career, and I encourage all of you to think about your career trajectories, and I see something very similar. Initially, we all struggle with, following bosses' orders, following what everyone else is doing. As we become more successful, that we get more emboldened with our success, that overconfidence, and that feeling that, I can get away with it just this once. So to be, whichever stage of your career you are in, think about what are the situational influences that tend to impact your action. So we already talked about these goals. I'll skip this slide. Let's look at our next case. You are a portfolio manager in the international sector who travels to a foreign country to investigate investment opportunities for your clients. The management of a large company that you visit and a potentially attractive investment opportunity gives you a very expensive gift. Think very expensive. Refusing the gift would be considered an insult in this country and harm the good relations that you have developed with the company's management. I want you to think about the facts for a bit. You are a portfolio manager, you travel to a foreign country, you are investigating investment opportunities, and you really like one particular opportunity for your client. However, the management of that company gives you a very expensive gift. Please be aware of the fact that refusing a gift in that country is seen as an insult. And if you refuse it, you might be jeopardizing all access you have to that management and thereby jeopardizing a lucrative opportunity for your clients. Accepting the gift is okay because refusal would jeopardize an investment opportunity. Probably okay if you accept and give it to charity. Probably not okay unless you tell your supervisor, unless you disclose to your supervisor, or you feel accepting an expensive gift is not okay under any circumstance. Let's see how we as a group think about it. To accept or not to accept is the dilemma. Choose, put your comments in the chat box, and let's see. I am most interested in knowing your reasoning behind your choices more than anything else. Okay, while you keep voting, I will open the response and see how we are. Okay, almost 70% says probably not okay unless you disclose to the supervisor. 20% feel not okay under any circumstance. And there are some people who feel fairly so that refusal could jeopardize an investment opportunity. And 3% feel probably okay if you give the gift to charity. Okay, Shade, let's see some comments.
Okay, Gloria, post it now.
No, those were questions. The comments are in the chat box.
Okay, I thought you were going to take everything, but never mind. We have some people say, I would accept and disclose to my supervisor and customer. Someone else says, not okay, accepting it jeopardizes your independence and objectivity.
Fair enough.
Another one says, accept, but inform your supervisor so as not to jeopardize the investment opportunity. Another one says, not okay, very expensive gift is subjective. Those are the comments I have so far in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. And I think
another one says, I would accept and disclose to my supervisor on customer record. Suggestive. Not okay. An expensive gift has an undertone.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has been captured in the comments. So thank you for your comments. Keep them coming. So the dilemma has been identified in the comments because someone said it might be seen to compromise your independence and objectivity. Even if it does not, it might be seen to compromise your independence and objectivity. So real is as good as perceived in our industry. And also you might feel under pressure after having accepted that gift. Some people might feel under pressure. So the point is that what should one do in these situations? And like I said, we are talking of real life situations. I would say in an ideal world, I would say we should never accept very expensive gifts in an ideal world, because then there is no issue. But we don't live in an ideal world. And sometimes we are confronted with these scenarios. And then we wonder what we should do, right? So sometimes if you find yourself in this scenario and you feel that you don't want to insult them and you don't want to jeopardize an investment opportunity for your clients, CFA Institute Code and Standards tell us that maybe disclosure is one of the ways to think about it. You accept that gift and you disclose it to your client, disclose it to your supervisor. I would go a step further, and the code and standards actually tell us that it must also be disclosed to the client whose money is being invested in that company. What does disclosure do? It gives your employer, your client, and heaven forbid if things were to go haywire, the regulator, an opportunity to assess your independence and objectivity. Shade, you were not there when I came to Nigeria last time. In one of the sessions, we had this case, and somebody commented, and I love that comment, and I've used it very often since then. They said, disclosure sets you free, right? And I thought that was a very nice comment. We are not saying that you abdicate all responsibility after disclosing, but disclosure does help you in certain circumstances when you can't do much about it. The point also is that so many companies have this policy that people can't disclose, and they necessarily have to put it in a common company pool. So at Christmas time, people go out for a nice meal, or the company gives it to a shortlisted charity, so that no one individual benefits from that, right? So the company is not insulted because you accepted that gift. B, you disclosed it to all the right people, and you gave it to the common company pool, so you are not getting impacted by it. I also put up this case very often is because we have people from now, it's not only investment professionals, many a times in my sessions, there are people from HR, there are people from compliance, and the idea is to tell them that having robust gift policies in your company will help your employees in these situations as well. So if that person were to tell the management of that company that I will get fired if I accept that gift because I am not allowed to accept anything beyond $50, then I don't think anybody would get insulted. Nobody wants anyone to lose their job. But you would be surprised at how many rooms are full of people I've stood in front of, and people have told me we don't have a robust gift policy. So in this situation, we wouldn't know what to do, right? So like I said, ideal world, we don't live in an ideal world. I really encourage all companies to have robust gift and policies. Many companies don't have it, but as an individual, you have ways and means to deal with it. Yeah.
Okay, Sonia, I think you've answered one question in the chat box that says that what if the gift isn't a very expensive one, but just to appreciate one's presence?
Yeah, so very good question. Yeah. So many a times when I travel to societies, when I do this present, they'll give me a token, like something last time your society gave me something really nice, small token of, something for me to remember Nigeria by, of very small monetary value. Those are okay. Many a times you go, people give you a pen with their, with their branding so that you remember. But please always follow your company's policy if your company has a policy. Tokens of appreciation are okay, but expensive gifts, then you need to know how to deal with them. Good question. Okay. All of you are familiar, most of you must be familiar with CFA Institute mission statement to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence for the ultimate benefit of society. Do you know that the last 6 words, which are in bold, were added to our mission statement after the last financial crisis? When there was a lot of thinking, there was a lot of soul searching at the Institute. And we realized that investment profession cannot exist in a bubble. It has to be in sync with what's for the larger benefit of the society. Our ethics pedagogy is based on our codes and standards. These codes and standards provide useful guidelines to professionals like us on how to deal with ethical dilemmas. They address that space where theory meets practice. They address that space where ethical behavior crosses from being an abstract concept to becoming concrete reality. So what I've done is, those are really many of us, many charter holders on this webinar today. I got my charter way back in 2002. Many of you must have got it way back. So today we'll do a quick refresher of the codes and standards. I have picked 9 fundamental ethical principles, which are the building blocks of these codes and standards. So we'll spend the next 5 minutes talking about those. Client interest comes first. I don't think anybody would argue with that. We saw, when we started this session, how, the problem we are grappling with the trust in our industry. The only way to set that right is to always put client interest first. Independence and objectivity. Every investment decision we make, every investment action we take on behalf of our clients must be free of all internal and external pressures. We saw in the last case, accepting a very expensive gift could be seen to impact our independence and objectivity. Every investment decision must have at its core only one driving principle, that it should be for the benefit of our clients. Conflicts of interest. Real life is full of conflicts of interest. I would say in an ideal world, just avoid all conflicts of interest, but every single day that we go to work, or when even working virtually, we are confronted with conflicts of interest. So since we can't avoid them, a good strategy is to learn how to manage them. In the last case we saw, disclosure is one of the ways to deal with conflicts of interest. Our Institute code and standards also talk about full and fair disclosure, about our investment methodology, about any changes we make to our investment methodology, about any shortcomings of our models and stuff like that. They instruct us, the code and standards instruct us to clearly differentiate between facts and opinions. Full and fair disclosure. Prohibition against using material non-public information. Why should we not indulge in insider trading? Because, when we indulge in insider trading, it compromises the integrity of capital market. People feel that people with access to special information can make more money at cost of regular investors. And this is the only out of these 9 fundamental ethical principles, this is the only one which is also illegal in almost all jurisdictions in the world. You will very likely find yourself either behind bars or paying a hefty fine if you indulge in insider trading. Confidentiality. As professionals, we have access to a lot of our client data. We must maintain the integrity of our client data. The code and standards tell us that there are only three circumstances in which we can reveal client information. A, when we feel that something illegal is going on, or B, if the regulator asks us for it, and so either something wrong is going on, or the regulator asks for it, or our client gives us permission to share that information. Fair dealing, we must deal with all our clients in a fair manner. We must not, the code and standards tell us, we can just differentiate between our clients. So as an equity salesperson, 80% of my commissions would come from 20% of my top clients. So of course, I will provide premium service to those 20% of clients. But if my analyst has made a change in recommendation, I will make sure that first an email, a Bloomberg note has gone out to all my clients so that everyone has access to the same information. Then I'm free to pick up the phone and specifically talk to those key clients who are giving me more commissions. So this says you can differentiate between your clients, but you must not discriminate. Diligence is what it means in the English language. Put in the work. Don't buy a stock for your client just because you heard something in an internet chat room or over lunch you heard somebody discussing something. Pour over the balance sheets, the income statements, talk to creditors, suppliers, competitors, whatever your methodology tells you to do everything before you invest your client's money. My favorite one is reasonable care and prudent judgment. Care means causing no harm to our clients. Prudence means acting with caution, acting with discretion, acting with care, acting with skill, acting with diligence. And I feel that if we follow the first 8 fundamental ethical principles, we are automatically, following the 9th one. If we are always putting client interest first, acting with independence and objectivity, we will be acting with reasonable care and prudent judgment under most circumstances. So I just wanted to put this here. And I also want to show you the headlines. This was the day Lehman filed for bankruptcy. These are the headlines the next morning. And when I look at the last financial crisis, when mortgages of suspect quality were being bundled together, and these mortgage-backed securities were getting stellar ratings from credit rating agencies, and these highly toxic, highly volatile securities were being bought in client account, many of them planning for retirement, I feel all these fundamental ethical principles were flouted, right? Client interest was not coming first, independence and objectivity was not being exercised, there were zillions of conflicts of interest, and most importantly, nobody was thinking of causing no harm to clients. Reasonable care and prudent judgment was not being exercised. And that really brings forth the power of these code and standards and the building blocks, these fundamental ethical principles. Now that we are, sorry?
There is a question just before you turn the slide.
Yeah.
Are these ethical principles in order of priority?
No, there is no order of priority here. I've just put them together. They are all equally important. Good question. All equally important. We need to follow all of them to be able to be able to win the trust back from our clients. Okay, now that we have gone through these fundamental ethical principles, let's exercise our ethical muscle. You are a securities analyst at an investment fund. One day you have lunch with a friend who's the executive assistant of the president of microtechnology. During lunch, your friend tells you that she's been working late because her boss has been meeting, with the president of Pambex Systems. Pambex and microtechnology are 2 companies in the same industry. After returning to your office, you learn that Pambex is rumored to be a takeover target. So you purchase shares of the company for your personal portfolio. Later in the day, you tell your boss about the conversation. Your boss observes that there has been heavy buying of Pambex shares recently, so he purchases shares of Pambex for the fund. So let's look at the facts once again. You are a securities analyst, you have lunch with a friend. She's executive assistant to president of microtechnology, and she says that she's been working late because her boss has been meeting with the top boss of another company in the same industry. You come back to your desk and you learn that Pambex is rumored to be a takeover target, so you purchase shares for your personal portfolio. After you bought shares for your personal portfolio, you tell your boss about it. Your boss observes that there is heavy buying in the shares, So he purchases those shares for fund. Should you or your boss have purchased shares in Pambex? And I really want you to think about those fundamental ethical principles, because many of them are at play here. That's why I put this case after we discuss those fundamental ethical principles. You and your boss were free to purchase shares. It was okay for you to have purchased shares, not for your boss. It was okay for your boss to have purchased shares, not you. Neither you nor your boss should have bought shares. Think about all those fundamental ethical principles. And this case has a lot going on, so have a look at the case again. And let's see how we vote. Should you or your boss have purchased shares in Pambex? Put in your comments why you are choosing what you are choosing. We'll read out a few comments, 2, 3, 4 comments, and see what the flavor is in this group. What are people thinking? Should you or your boss have purchased shares in Pambex? Think about the ethical dilemma. Think about who you owe a duty to. Are there any conflicts of interest? Let's see how people are voting. Wow, neither you nor your boss should have purchased shares. 83% of the people are saying that. I'm interested in knowing why. Which ethical principle is telling you not to buy those shares? 13% people feel you and your boss were free to purchase. 4% feel it was okay for your boss to have purchased. Shade, let's hear some comments.
Okay, we have comments here saying it's insider trading, using material non-public information, and for your boss, there's no reasonable basis for the purchase. The information is non-material, but due diligence wasn't followed. In-depth research should have been conducted. So you have someone saying it's material information, somebody saying it's non-material, but there's no diligence. Buying the shares by either you or your boss will constitute to trading on material, non-public information. It is wrong. The shares of the company should be on the restricted list. Because I don't think it's non-material, non-public, as you didn't learn about it during lunch. I don't understand what that person is saying. They both didn't have an adequate basis and no diligence was exercised. Also using material non-public information. The information was not officially given. Insider trading of material non-public information. So the bulk of the comments is all around the information being material non-public. And then some people are saying, even if it was, there was no due diligence being done before the decision was taken to buy the shares.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. I think you guys have captured quite a lot. I'll come to that. So people are saying it was material non-public information. Some people are saying it was not, but even then it did not have been bought because there was no diligence, no reasonable basis. So you guys have covered quite a few fundamental ethical principles here. So I'll start with the first one. Is it really material non-public information? We have no idea what was being discussed in that room. Maybe they were discussing their golf handicap just because 2 people are meeting late at night. It's non-public information, but it does not make it material, right? They might be discussing which university, which US university they are sending their kids to. So technically, it's not material non-public information. Having established that, let's see whether you or your boss should have still bought it. So very good point has been raised that even if it's not MNPI, there is no reasonable basis. I agree with that. The boss didn't really put in the work. Where is the diligence? He came, he saw something, and he bought it. Again, the point is that in some, so as a equity salesperson, I've seen some of my clients would have a very tiny percentage of their portfolio, very tiny, for special situations where, you know, if market's telling them something, they would go ahead and they would buy it and things like that. I've come to that point that even if, you know, A, there is no diligence, and B, supposing you bought it, and now the rumors come true, the merger happens, the stock hits sky high. Now, regulators, being the way they are nowadays, they will look at which funds were active in these companies just before the merger. And the name of your fund is going to come up in the regulator scrutiny that this fund bought. If you are in US, you will probably get something called a Wells notice, where the securities market regulator sends you a very politely worded letter saying that we invite you to our offices and for a chat, and it would be a very good idea to get your lawyer along. Now you are in trouble. You did not act on any material non-public information, but the regulator has asked you. So you go to the regulator's office. What will help you make your case to the regulator then? What will help you is your documentation, is your diligence. If you show that I did not act on MNPI, this is, you know, I followed my methodology. This is, I have documented it. This is how we do it. Your diligence, your reasonable basis, being able to prove to the regulator that you had a reasonable basis to do that. That will stand you in good stead. So what we are trying to say is there is no shortcut to this, even if it is not MNPI. In this environment that we live in, where regulators are hyper vigilant for good reason, they are hyper vigilant because a lot of crap is going on. It helps to have your, you know, reasonable basis properly be there and properly documented. What is wrong with you buying those? Nobody commented on that. You are managing your own money. You are not managing other people's money, and you don't have to exercise. Even if you're a CFA charter holder, you don't have to exercise diligence in how you manage your own money, right? You are free to lose all of it and invest it. The point is, in some firms, and I know the firms in which I worked, if I acted before my client, it was seen as front running. So you acting without giving your firm, your clients an opportunity to act on the information, you acting on it can be seen as front running in some firms. I'm not saying it would be the case in all firms. So just, you know, covering all the possible aspects over here. So it takes me back to that slide about, even if it is legal, you realize that it was not material non-public information, it was legal. Should you still be doing it? And if you are doing it, make sure always it's a best practice to follow those fundamental ethical principles. Have a reasonable basis, be diligent, document, make sure that, you know, you have everything to show for. You are doing the hard work, make sure you can show it as well. Okay, at the beginning of the session, I talked to you about the ethical decision-making framework. This has been developed by CFA Institute, and it is meant to provide, it's a tool to analyze some of the ethical dilemmas that we talked about in finance industry, in investment industries, situations that don't have a strict right or wrong answer, which are shades of gray. It tells you there are 4 steps. Of course, the first step is to recognize that there is an ethical problem. If you don't recognize there is a dilemma, it will be business as usual. You won't do anything about it. Once you have recognized, the first step is to identify which is the ethical principle involved. We saw in the gift case, it was independence and objectivity. We saw in the last case, there were several ethical principles involved. Who do you owe a duty to? Like I said in the first case, just when you are confused, take a step back, think about who I owe a duty to. In the team's case, it was clearly you owed a duty to your clients to do something about it. To be able to properly analyze the ethical principles and with who I owe a duty to requires a rigorous review of all the facts. If you see in every case, I've repeated those facts so that, you know, you can assimilate those facts before choosing your option. Also see if there are any conflicts, if is a situation getting further compounded by any conflicts of interest. Once you have done all this, consider, are you acting under any situational influences? Are you acting under boss's orders? Or are you acting from a position of overconfidence where you are doing, just thinking that, because, or you are justifying your actions by saying just this once? Are there any alternative courses of action? In the team's case, we saw maybe having a constructive dialogue with your colleagues can help situation in some times. Do you need any additional guidance from a mentor, from a boss, from somebody else in the industry who you respect? Once you have identified everything, considered everything else, act by making a decision. Sometimes it might involve elevating it to your HR department, to your compliance department, and in a case where there is illegal stuff going on, you may have to reach out to the regulator. Reflect on what you have learned and on your strengths and weaknesses in applying this ethical decision-making framework. The point is that you haven't even realized, but in the cases we were going like that. I was telling you, think about who you owe a duty to and think about the fundamental ethical principles. This does not take hours and hours of thinking. Once you get used to doing this, in a few minutes, you can just run it through in your mind or sit down with a pen and paper and write, and it will help you arrive at an optimum course of actions. Maybe not the best course of action every single time, but as you do it more and more, you will get better at it. Yeah. Okay, so we are around, so Shadi, how much time do we have? Can't hear you, you are on mute.
Apologies. For you to round up like 5 minutes, and then we can take some questions.
Okay, perfect. So I am, two things I want to do. First, I want to talk about rationalizations, and then I want to talk about a real life case study, which will put everything that we've discussed in the last 1.5 hours together. I talked about the concept of incrementalism, the slippery slope, and this is the second concept which I really, really want to leave you guys with. Rationalizations. They provide the justifications for not taking the right course of action. You have to know that human mind is excellent at rationalizing our actions. We are all very, very good at it. It justifies behavior that is inconsistent with our own opinion of ourselves and changes our perception of a situation to defend our behavior. And I really like this quote: there has never been an act done since the beginning, from a kid stealing candy to a dictator committing genocide, that the person doing it didn't think he was fully justified. That's a mental trick called rationalizing. And it's done the human race more harm than anything else you can name. If you find yourself in any situation, if you find telling yourself one of these sentences, please, it's my request to you, take a pause, take a step back. Any of these, if you find yourself, saying, I want to be a team player, that is the way they do it at Firm X, just realize that you are rationalizing your action. And take a step back, think about it for a moment. Now what I want to do is, I really want to end this session, run this by the legal department, but run super fast so that ethics department doesn't see the traffic tussle between ethics and legal. So I want to bring together everything we discussed in the last hour and a half in the context of a real life case that's happened. And that will probably help you understand that how important it is, the learnings of today's session. The gentleman you see on your screens, his name is Tom Hayes. Tom Hayes was, this is the title of the slide, The Spider Network, is the name of a book which I read last year before last, I think. And it's on Libor scandal, and more importantly, it's on Mr. Hayes' life. And when I read that book, it resonated with me because it's all about what we discuss in our ethics training. So we made a slide out of it. And so Mr. Tom Hayes was hired by UBS in 2006 to be for their equity, for their derivatives desk in Tokyo. He was, he was a very smart kid, straight out of college. He got an internship with RBC, with Royal Bank of Canada, with Royal Bank of Scotland. Both the places he did a great job. And then UBS heard of him and they poached him for their Tokyo desk. In a very short span of time, Mr. Hayes made a name for himself at the bank. Very soon, he was known amongst the smartest derivatives trader on the street. Mr. Hayes had a very nice system whereby through his network of contacts, brokers and traders, dealers in various institutions across the globe, he had his contacts who helped him manipulate LIBOR. We know that trillions of dollars worth of transactions worldwide are referenced to LIBOR. So if you have an indication about LIBOR, you have a very significant edge. So these traders and dealers, in return for trades and commissions that he would send their way, they helped him manage LIBOR in a direction that would be profitable for his trades. He was making millions and millions of dollars in profits for his bank, UBS. When the last financial crisis hit, we saw that slide the day after Lehman filed for bankruptcy. Mr. Tom Hayes was at the top of his game, manipulating, rigging LIBOR and making millions of dollars profits for the bank. That summer, Goldman Sachs approached him. In fact, in 2008, early 2008, Goldman Sachs approached him with a $3 million sign-on bonus. They wanted to poach him. He refused. Later that year, Citibank approached him with a similar offer, which he accepted. So when this whole story unraveled, he was no longer working with UBS, he was working at Citibank. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, there was a lot of chatter in the market about reliability of LIBOR. So the regulators, they started looking at it. They wanted to know what's going on. And any conversation that they would have anywhere in the world, one name kept popping up, Tom Hayes. So they approached Mr. Hayes. And when the investigation intensified, Citi, which had paid a $3 million sign-on bonus a few months ago to hire him, promptly let go of him. They did not want to have anything. Finally, Mr. Hayes got an 11-year prison term, which was very much top of the line for white-collar crime. He's behind bars, away from his young child and wife. He's gone broke fighting all these legal cases, and he'll probably never get an opportunity to work in the finance industry again. That's one part of the story. The part of the story I want us to focus on today is what he said in the quote. He said, manipulating LIBOR seemed like common industry practice. Everyone else was doing it. Who was I to question? Remember that situational influence on taking about our cues from our colleagues and others about the right thing to do? How do we justify everyone else is doing it? He also told the judge, my superiors were aware of what I was doing. In fact, they continuously pushed me to pursue an envelope pushing strategy. Remember the situational influence about following bosses' orders? He said his bosses, if you read the book, you realize his bosses just turned a blind eye. They didn't want to know what he was doing. They knew, so the point is that bosses are not behind bars, colleagues are not behind bars. He's the one who was behind bars there because his phones were tapped and there was a lot of emails and there was a lot of evidence against him. I also realized when I read that book that Mr. Hayes did not get up one fine day and he said, let's be unethical, let's start rigging LIBOR. It started really small. He had issue with one trade. He managed to set it right. And then it increased his confidence. He got emboldened to take bigger and bigger bets. The classic slippery slope. And the more confident he started getting, the more emboldened he got, the more success he got, the more overconfidence he acquired. And I love the way that all the 4 situational influences we talked about, bosses' orders, taking up conformity with others, incrementalism, the slippery slope, overconfidence in our own ability to do the right thing, came together beautifully in his case and led to some very, very serious wrongdoing. Such a young, intelligent, bright man, and not being able to work in finance industry ever again, probably. So I want all of us to think about this deeply, because these situational influences in one form or the other may be acting in our professional lives as well. Maybe we are not recognizing them. So maybe we need to become more mindful of them. And also remember that, they can have pretty severe consequences if left unaddressed. And to end the session, this is my favorite quote from Warren Buffett. After they obey all rules, I want my employees to ask themselves whether they are willing to have any contemplated act appear the next day on the front page of their local paper to be read by their spouses, children, and friends, with the reporting done by an informed and critical reporter. Think about, in the present digital age, think about a YouTube video of your actions going viral. If that makes you uncomfortable, that should give you a cause for pause. Chade, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you for such an engaging time of reminding us and educating us on the little acts that can become an issue for us on the ethical side in terms of our actions. Now, Gloria, you said you were going to summarize the questions. There were a few questions that came in that would like you to provide answers to. I'll just read the one I have on my screen now while Gloria pulls them together. This question says, despite efforts of bodies like CFA and many more, it appears, did you just put something as it moved? It appears the issue of trust remains a mirage. Is that a manifestation of failure of key players, or why?
I agree with you. It really seems like a mirage, and it's decade after decade we see one bubble after the other happening in our industry, which breaks investor trust. We saw how 11 years after the financial crisis, we are still struggling to get that trust back. I think so in my role, I have the privilege of getting to meet many regulators. So across the region, I'm responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I have met a lot of regulators. I meet a lot of industry professionals, and the one thing that comes through very clearly is through, I talk to professionals in the industry, that there are enough rules and regulations, but they are not being followed in the right spirit. It really goes back to those three questions. The rules are being followed in letter rather than in spirit. We find ways and means to go around those rules, which leads to acting in unethical manner, which leads to acting in manner which are not really honest. So I think every single person in the industry, and sessions like today are a small step in that direction from CFA Institute, to remind all of us that we have to play our individual roles. We just can't rely on rules and regulations. There are enough rules and regulations. We have to do our bit to make sure that they are followed in the right spirit, not just in letter. And I think if all of us start making those little efforts, I am very hopeful that we will see the situation change. But till then, yeah, we have a long way to go. I agree.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head when you said is the motive behind complying with the rules that's key. Is it just to obey the letter of the rule or the spirit of the rule? And that's the key thing. The next question says, telling lies are bad, but not illegal. This seems to be one of the issues that make ethics very vague. I will appreciate clarity on this.
Good question. Ethics. So something that makes teaching ethics so hard and so interesting at the same time for me, because it's hard, it makes it interesting. It's a lot of shades of gray. There is no black and white, right? What might seem ethical to me may seem unethical to Shade, for all I know, or to someone else. And And that's why I feel that, and that's where the code and standards come in, because they provide those unbiased ethical principles for us to follow, right? Coming to your question about telling lies, it's definitely, it's not illegal, but it is unethical. It's not honest. It's about asking those three questions. Even though it meets the requirement of question number one, it does not cross the legal boundaries. It does cross the boundary of honesty. It does cross the boundary of fairness. And I think when we are telling lies, maybe put ourselves in the other person's shoes and see how it feels, how it impacts their lives when, you know, we are by our actions or our lying words. So again, it goes back to, I keep harping on those three questions, but really that's the key to it. Laws are not enough. We have to practice honesty. We have to practice fairness.
Yeah. The next one, I think you've kind of answered, but let me just read it to you in case you want to add one or two things. When there's conflict between ethics and law, what should be done?
So law is here, and I think ethics is at a higher level, right? Ethics is more aspirational. Law tells you what you can do and what you cannot do. Ethics tells you even if you can do it, should you still do it? It's between could, can, and should. Law tells you whether you can do it or no. If you do it, you will find yourself behind bars. And if you do this is fine, you're allowed to do it. Again, going back to that question, asking yourself, even if I can do it, should I still be doing it? How would it feel to be in the other person's shoes who's getting impacted by these actions? It really, yeah, you're right, Shade. It's already been addressed several times.
Yeah, but the person was asking if there can be a conflict between ethics and law. Can there be a conflict?
Conflict in the sense, logically, there shouldn't be.
Can you be keeping the, no, can you be ethical even if you're, can you be unethical even if you're keeping the law? I think that's what the person is trying to say. And like you mentioned, ethics is higher, so ethics embodies the law. So yeah, if you're breaking the law, you are unethical. But we're saying even if you're keeping the law, you can still be unethical. So ethics embodies everything. You have to keep the law to be ethical. There can't be.
So going back, thank you for that. Going back to our code and standards, the very first standard of professional conduct is knowledge of the law. We start from there. Mm-hmm. Never ever break the law in your jurisdiction. Never. Ethics comes after that. So thank you.
Okay. Then we have. Okay, that's it. Is there a whistleblower obligation in the CFA ethical framework, or is dissociation from ethical behavior enough?
Sorry, I didn't get the question, Shade.
Is there a whistleblower obligation in the CFA ethical framework?
Got it.
Or just dissociating from ethical behavior, is that enough?
Very good question. Our code and standards do not put an obligation on our candidates and members to whistleblow. They recommend that if you feel you can, so dissociation is very important, making sure you are not involved with any illegal activity. And beyond that, if you want to reach out to the regulator and disclose that, good. But we don't put an obligation because we do realize that it is not easy. Many a times it can land people in fairly uncomfortable circumstances. So no obligation, but recommendation.
Okay, that's actually all the questions we have in there. The last question says, will there be an electronic certificate for participation for this? There will be no certificate issued for participating in this webinar. However, if you're a member of the CFA Institute, you will get professional learning credit of 2 points. So you would need to, I don't know how we're going to get the membership numbers. Gloria, did we register with membership numbers? We need to have the membership number so that the professional learning credits can be put into your account. There will be no certificate. Okay, any other questions? If you have, maybe we have time to take maybe like one more.
Yeah. And
or
Shade, I'm just
two.
going to, there's a short poll. I'll activate it. Just it will take 2 minutes for people to, there are 2 short questions. It really helps
Fantastic.
us to understand what people thought about the training. And I'm not going to display these results. So please be honest in your feedback, right? There are 2 short questions. And the third one, if you have any feedback, you can put it in, there in the third question.
And you need to vote on the website, not in the chat box.
Yeah, whoever is still logged on, it would be nice if they can put their feedback, and then it just helps us to understand what resonated with you all and how can we do a better job of our trainings as well. Many thanks, everyone. I'm seeing almost as many people as were voting have are putting in their feedback as well. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Yeah. As at this point in time, we have 140 people on the webinar.
Okay.
That means some people actually dropped off because at the peak of it, we had 172.
172. Okay. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. And almost, I've noticed that around 60, 65 people have consistently voted. So that's good as well.
Yeah. So great.
And I thought that thank you to everyone who participated in the chat. That was really good to hear people's view. And Shade, you did an excellent job of reading out those very fast incoming messages. So congratulations.
Yeah, we should be saying thank you to you, Sonia. Thank you for enlightening us and reminding us of our obligation to our market. There's some things that I have picked that I love that definition of ethics, doing the right thing when no one is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. It's really profound. It summarizes everything and puts it in proper context.
Yeah, no, that's one of the best definitions I've come across.
Yes, it's excellent. And we need to keep reminding ourselves that situational circumstances can induce even unethical behavior in the most holy of people. So we shouldn't assume that we cannot be affected. So one of the key things we can use to guard ourselves is to ensure we don't put ourselves into circumstances that can make us want to or consider it. And I think you've done an excellent job of giving us the examples of those kind of situational circumstances. Your boss can influence you, your friends can influence you. What's happening in the market, everybody's doing it. It's not an acceptable excuse. So we should be saying a very, very big thank you. And also the fact that we should be careful of the slippery slope. That's another one. Incrementalism and then rationalization, rationalizing behavior. That's what happens a lot in our market, really. People justify things. People lose the sense of, could it be right, just because a lot of people are doing it? And therefore, they do not even see, they don't even recognize that as an ethical situation for which they should pull back and reassess what behavior would be right. Also, you talked about front running and being very careful about that as well. So thank you so much. I have a few announcements for everyone on the webinar. As you are well aware, we have an industry practitioners ethical challenge that we have opened application for. And we're going to be having an ethics challenge where we would have people who are working in the industry being the ones that would be presenting their opinion on the ethical cases that will be given out to them. So if you haven't shown interest in participating, you still have time because the application opened on it opened on August 11, about 2 weeks ago, and will be closing on September 11. You are going to be participating as an individual, not for your office. So it's an individual thing. And what we want to do is we want to create fun. We want to remind ourselves of ethical principles in a fun manner. And so we'll be forming teams that will cut across institutions. It's not going to be a firm versus firm, but it's going to be a team versus team. And we will have an event that we will announce to you where we would make a draw to form the teams. So it will be good if you're a practitioner. We do not want students to enter because we're going to check. We want those who are working in the industry to be the ones participating in this challenge. And the format is going to be that we're going to have a case presentation. We will form teams of about 4. And we don't know how many teams we're going to have until the application closes. We might need to have a semi-final before a final if we have a lot of teams. But it's just going to be a very, very nice way of getting to know people in your industry, because you might find yourself working with someone that you've never met before and creating some bonding and working together, building that team spirit, and then coming to make a presentation. And Sonia has volunteered to be one of our judges for the grand finale, the real finals of the finals. So she's going to definitely be one of our judges. And so the finals will occur in October, but we'll be giving you more information as the time goes by. So right now, application is open. In the chat box right now, we've posted the link for you to apply. And we're actually looking forward to a grand session, a very beautiful event. And there will be great prizes for the winners. There will be great prizes for the winners. We're also going to have a regulator be one of our judges. So we will not be allowing the regulators to participate at this stage. We want industry practitioners to be the ones that form the teams and are competing against one another. There's professional learning credit for this session. So if you're a member, you will be getting 2 points for having attended this session. I'd like to thank everyone who has attended, who have stayed throughout. I'm sure that you would agree with me that it was a very rewarding time spent with Sonia. We were reminded of our duty, which is first and foremost for the market, for the ultimate benefit of society, and therefore for our customers. Every other thing dovetails from it: the diligence, the independence, handling the conflict of interest, and everything else. So Sonia, I'd like to say a very, very big thank you again for having made our time for us and having led us through this webinar.
No, thank
to
you
all
for
the members
having
of the to all the members of the Board of Governors, I don't know how many of them are on this webinar. We say thank you for giving us this opportunity to run the session as advocacy committee. Then I'd like to thank the advocacy committee members themselves, especially our sub-team under advocacy that is focused on ethical profession, led by Tosin Ojo. Thank you so much for putting this together. They put it together from beginning to the end, and they're also in charge of the ethics challenge. Thank you so much, Tosin, for handling it on our behalf. Society staff, we can't do anything without you. Thank you for all the mails you keep sending out and setting this up and making sure that it ran and successfully. We are exceptionally grateful. To everyone on the webinar, without you, there would have been no webinar. We really, really, really appreciate your time. And for me, I think one thing we all should do is to note what we have learned or the areas where we do need to strengthen ourselves based on what we have heard today, and then begin to go out there, preach the gospel of ethical behavior, and leave it out in the way and manner we take our decisions as practitioners. So without much ado, I say a very big thank you. And this will be the end of this webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Have a lovely
Bye.
afternoon.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Right. Great.